All right, good morning, everyone. I think it's morning still. Thanks for braving the snow and coming out today. I'm Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanak, and I would like to invite you to what will be the first of a monthly effort to do a community safety briefing for the community and with all of our media partners as well. This is an effort because we have been really working hard to continue to evolve our communication strategies in my administration in these first 10 months, and we realize we can even do more to be even more transparent and proactive in how we talk about the numerous initiatives related to community safety. We are, as I said, we're going to do this on a regular basis, so likely the second week of the month. This is the first one here in February, and this will build upon regular updates I give at every city council meeting during mayor updates, which is one of the first items of the council meetings, where I talk about community safety and what we've been up to. I also give consistent updates at the 4 mayor meetups I provide every week throughout the city. We also send emails, social media, and of course hold our bi-monthly community safety forums. But we're trying to add this as well, just to make sure we're hitting the high-level key points for the community. And then, as you'll see, we'll able to provide further and further updates each month on the topics we'll discuss today. We're also hoping to be predictable so that you can really get an update in 3 major areas, which will include what is happening related to police and fire, what is happening to public health, and then items that are sort of cross-department. That's how we'll organize these updates in terms of those 3 large bucket areas. So the first update related to police and fire related issues. As you all likely saw yesterday, we made a very proud and happy announcement here in the city of Burlington, where we were able to hire interim chief for the police department, and Chief Sean Burke from the South Burlington Police Department will be joining us. It is something that I consider one of my most exciting opportunities in these first 10 months. It took a lot of work and effort and partnership over the last several weeks to begin working on this and finding what solutions we could have to make sure we have continuity and strong continuity at that in our police department as we manage the police transition in the next couple of months. Over those last 2 months, I've been working and talking to almost a dozen different law enforcement leaders throughout the state of Vermont and sometimes outside the state of Vermont to seek advice on this leadership transition. I'm continuing to do this work, including even today. I will have a call just in about an hour or so with Commissioner Charles Ramsey, who is a former police chief in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. I was able to meet him at a Bloomberg Mayor's Conference in December, and he offered his services to provide advice and counsel on how we continue to move forward in our police chief hiring process, but also other matters regarding our police department, recruitment, community-based strategies, etc. So I'm very excited about that call later today. In all of these calls, I've talked about the need for finding an interim chief, and that being my #1 priority in terms of this transition. I've also asked for just general advice on what to do in terms of hiring a police chief to make sure we find the right candidate to serve Burlington and meeting our needs today. I also had Chief Burke was one of those people I had reached out to, and I'm proud to say over a course of several conversations leading up to that announcement yesterday, I was able to confidently know that our values are truly aligned on how and what we need to do to lead Burlington forward in terms of community safety. His understanding of the nuanced approach to community safety, that this is much larger than what we do just with our police headcount. And also his well-known history with the agency is not only unique, it is highly valuable for the city of Burlington, which is why this announcement is such a great moment for our city. I greatly appreciate him for being willing to come back to the Queen City, and I also greatly appreciate South Burlington, especially the city manager, Jessie Baker, for her strong partnership and knowing that this is truly a moment of being in it together in terms of Burlington being able to figure out our community safety challenges is something that benefits the entire region as well as the state of Vermont. She's been a true partner, Jessie Baker, in terms of this transition and rolling out this communication. As you probably saw in the release yesterday, Chief Burke brings 21 years of experience with the Burlington Police Department. He retired in 2018 at the rank of Deputy Chief of Operations within the BPD. He's also held various leadership roles throughout the state, including on the Vermont Domestic Violence Fatality Review Commission, the Department of Public Safety's School Crisis Planning Team. He was the first vice president, or maybe he is the first vice president, is the first vice president of the Vermont Association of Chief of Police, and he is also the chair of the Vermont Law Enforcement Advisory Board. sure you'll have questions. I ask that you hold those into the end because this particular update is on a number of items. And next up, we are going to hear from my Senior Advisor on Community Safety, Ingrid Jonas, who will speak a little bit on the police chief search process and where we are in that. Welcome, Ingrid.
Hi everyone, my name is Ingrid Jonas. I'm the Mayor's Advisor on Community Safety. Just a quick update, we went through the city's process for requesting proposals and qualifications from what are referred to as executive search firms. We've got 2 firms that are being reviewed, and we should, the Mayor should have a decision by the end of this week. If you have any specific questions at the end regarding those firms or their qualifications, they're both nationally recognized firms. Thank you.
And it is still my goal to identify, hopefully, a qualified candidate by the end of 2025. But as Ingrid said, we're really at the point of making sure we select the right firm to help lead this process with us. Next up, I want to give you an update on our public safety building. And this is an effort to create a new public safety building in the city of Burlington. When I began, I really started to understand that our current facilities are no longer provide safe working conditions and provide adequate space for the staff trying to perform our first responder duties. This is both related to police and fire, specifically our central fire station, which I'm sure Chief LaChance would be happy to talk to you about the state of that particular station. But this applies to our police station at 1 North Avenue, as well as the needs for, as I mentioned, our fire department. So we have begun the process of finding a feasible site to relocate and to locate this new building. There's also a need to create a separate space. You've heard me talk often about the emergence of a public health part of our community safety response. And so having a new building provides an opportunity for us to dream into and build into what we need for the next several years in Burlington. And that includes a comprehensive and coordinated effort of responding to the public health side of our community safety needs in the city. We have put out an RFQ, a request for qualifications, that went out at the end of November to kick off this project, and proposals were due on December 20th. We received 7 proposals to help us with this process. The phases of work that were in those proposals include site feasibility and concept design, as well as a community engagement component of this. It includes a preliminary a preliminary review of our final design and engineering needs, as well as the construction management, so what the cost and the construction build-out would be. We had a great team throughout the city review these proposals, including folks from our clerk treasurer's office, our facilities crew, our senior engineer, and Ingrid from my office as the liaison to the office of the mayor, my office. And the initial contract award will focus on, again, site feasibility and selection. We're trying to keep this in the inner city of the area of the city. Building programming and spatial needs. So what actual square footage do we need based on the programming we're anticipating and the services we're anticipating in that space, a conceptual design, and then again, back to public outreach and engagement. We will be bringing a proposed contract award to the City Council for that work, to the Board of Finance and City Council on March 10th. And then specifically 1 North Avenue, the improvements at that particular police station there's some immediate needs we really need to do. This building of a new public safety building will take time, it will take planning, it will take finding resources with likely public and private partnerships. But in the time being, our police officers and professional staff at the BPD really need some immediate improvements right now in that building. So we are currently finishing work. You probably will see this if you drive by the building. We're with existing capital money, which includes repairing and replacing the pillars of the front entrance, which is right on the corner of North Avenue. And I should know this, Sherman Street. Thanks, Brian Pine is always there with the history and the streets, and if you need to know who was in what position when, ask Brian Pine over the history of the city. So that's in the front entrance of the department's building. We're also working on the entryway inside the lobby, so finishing the repairs from the arson, but also making sure we're building out an entryway that can allow a staff person to be there. This was part of an outgrowth of one of our community safety advisor recommendations, is that when you walk into that building, you don't have a human there when you walk in. So it's hard to navigate whatever you're there for, basic information, victim services, whatever it might be. So we are finishing upfitting that space to allow the safety and the operations for an individual to take that role. We are also replacing, super exciting, but floor replacement. The floor there is really quite a hazard. Our facilities team just brought something to the Board of Finance on Monday to follow through with that work and repair work, and the HVAC system is being replaced in the administrative wing of that building. That's all with current capital needs. We are working with a really strong partner, Ernie Parmelo, to continue to do more on that building because, as folks know, a number of weeks ago now, we had a critical safety issue within a parking lot and the back entrance or the side entrance of the police department. And for years, the BPOA has told me that for years they've been asking for a fence, better security for the facility as people come and leave their work for their shifts. And so Mr. Pomerleau has been very generous in being able to help provide some more immediate resources to look into installing a fence and other security measures we can support that building. Also, he's taken a tour of the building and working with our facility team and capital team to see if we can accelerate anything that are must-dos in that building for the next couple years to keep it a safe and healthy building for the folks who work there. We'll provide more details of that on the February 18th council meeting next week. Just very briefly, because there is also a general obligation bond for which the city's hoping gets advanced on town meeting day, we'll be able to do more capital upgrades to the building that I think are still critical needs in the short term that include everything from locker room renovations to expanding our dispatch space to net zero energy work on the building, as also renovations to our BTV care space within that building. A number of items get much easier to do if we have support of a general obligation bond from voters. And with that, I'm going to now switch it to another topic. And next up, we are going to start talking around our public health updates related to community safety. And first, we have Sarah Russell, who was very smart to not drive in an unsafe way through the snow from the City of Burlington's CEDO side of things. And hopefully we can see you. There you are, Sarah. Sarah is our advisor on, special assistant, I should say, to ending homelessness here in the City of Burlington. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks everybody for accommodating. The snow is quite outrageous at my house, and fair warning, I have 3 kids and a husband somewhere in the background here. So I'm here today to provide some updates around our initiatives to end homelessness. First, I'd like to start always with a bit of data. Locally, according to our most recent reporting, we have approximately 814 households that are enrolled in coordinated entry within Chittenden County. Of those 814, we have 84 families with minor children who are enrolled in coordinated entry within Chittenden County as well. We tend to manage data around our unsheltered population a little bit differently because we know that those folks may not necessarily be enrolled in coordinated entry. And our most recent data indicates that there are about 257 people in Chittenden County who have identified as sleeping unsheltered. Of these, we estimate that about 60% of them are encompassed in that 814 number of folks who are enrolled in coordinated entry. In response to the large number of folks who are unsheltered in Chittenden County, as many of you know, the city has taken lead in partnership with the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity and with funding from the Agency of Human Services to open extreme cold weather shelters when the weather threshold is met. We have operated this shelter now for 7 nights since the beginning of the season. We have served within those 7 nights approximately 490 bed nights with an average nightly census of right around 70 people. We are seeing increased vulnerability of the medical, mental health, and substance use needs of folks who are accessing this shelter. And we've been really grateful to have great response from the Burlington Fire Department and volunteers from the Medical Reserve Corps in helping us to respond to some medical challenges that we have experienced at this shelter. We continue to monitor weather modeling very closely to ensure that when the temperature and other factors are met, we're able to really quickly stand up and operate this emergency extreme cold weather shelter. in addition to the kind of crisis management portion of our work around homelessness, we're also looking to longer term, how do we expand emergency shelter capacity? We have seen 30 beds of shelter capacity come online. Just in the last month from COTS, they opened 30 beds on Pearl Street. Those are seasonal beds, and we anticipate those will operate until April, through the end of April. CBOEO also plans to open 30 beds of seasonal shelter capacity within the next couple of weeks, and we're hopeful that that will relieve some of the strain on all of our systems and reduce the need for the emergency cold weather shelters to open. In addition, the city is working with the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance to host a convening of shelter and service providers to discuss our needs as a community and our planning around how we can increase shelter capacity. I think that we all recognize that the solution to homelessness is not shelter. It really is permanent affordable housing. We are bumping up against some challenges, funding restrictions on the federal level related to rental assistance and access to new rental assistance vouchers, which make our efforts to transition households from homelessness into permanent housing all that much more challenging in the coming calendar year. Until we know more about that, it's important for us to not only track and kind of manage those changes on the federal level related to rental assistance and our homeless programs, but also to make sure that we are creating a thorough and responsive safety net for folks who are living unsheltered in the meantime here locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Chief, do you want to explain our emergency? No, you don't.
No.
Okay. Whoa, that was a look. That was on camera, Chief.
I know.
Just very briefly about what our city's policy is for when we open the shelter.
Sure. Yeah.
And,
So
and you want to explain why you're the person talking about it? Emergency management.
I can. She promised me I wouldn't have to say anything. That was the look. So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike LaChance. I'm the fire chief and also the emergency management director for the city of Burlington. Sarah and I work very closely together to identify when the shelter should open. There's a few metrics that we go by. We look at the NOAA weather modeling, and we look at wind chill temperatures. If wind chill temperatures are 10 below zero or lower for more than 3 hours, we identify the need to open. This is for the overnight hours. More than 12 inches of snow over the time that over the evening hours, we identify that the shelter needs to be opened. And more than a quarter of an inch of freezing rain. The freezing rain one is just because the trees get heavy, and a lot of times folks where they're staying is within the brush, and it's a safety factor. So more than a quarter inch of freezing rain, more than 12 inches of snow over the sleeping period, and 10 below zero real feel temperature for more than 3 hours. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Chief. The last item under public health I'm going to provide an update on is actually on behalf of Teresa Vizina, who is our specialist on the implementation of an overdose prevention center. She was going to be here, trapped in Boston, snow, New England, all the things. So with that, I want to just offer what she has been working on over the last 6 weeks or so since she's joined our team in the mayor's office. There was a letter of interest that was posted on the city website on February 5th and will remain open until February 26th to begin the search for finding a service provider to operate the Overdose Prevention Center. We have a diverse review committee put together that she has already found, who will begin reviewing those submissions almost on a rolling basis as they start to come in, so we can move efficiently and effectively through our process. We would then invite the successful service provider candidates to the next phase to build out a proposal on March 12th. So we're doing this in a staged fashion in order to make sure we're finding the right partners. Also partners with an S, and I said that specifically because there might be a combination of folks within the community who their coordinated approach would be the best approach for what Burlington needs. We recognize this is a very complex project that requires thoughtful attention, community engagement, planning, and development. And while this is a crucial life-saving initiative that Burlington is trying to bring online, it's also very important, especially right now, for us to take the necessary steps to implement a program that is sustainable and meets the required guidelines set forth by the Vermont Department of Health. This is still a priority for the city. I consider us very much on track and moving forward as efficiently and effectively as possible. We continue to be in constant communication with the Department of Health, with the state of Vermont, and community stakeholders. And we will be balancing both the urgency of this, but also being strategic at the same time. It is unlikely, that we will see this program being able to be open and offering services in 2025. And I want to be clear that last summer, when things were different times, I was very ambitious and hopeful that we could open something within a year. And a lot has happened in these first 10 months of being mayor, and I emphasize outside of Burlington and Vermont. And so despite my hopes, this is something we're still moving forward on, but not on the timeline I once anticipated. Teresa's available for any meetings or outreach from folks, and you can reach her through our office. And so with that, closes our public health section, moving to our third and final updates on community-related issues and community safety issues. We have two topics here, and first I'm going to have our Director of Business, Workforce, and Development, who supports our downtown and businesses throughout the city, Kara lnasrawi, who will speak to our hotspot strategy.
Hi, good afternoon. Kara lnasrawi. So we have convened under the mayor's leadership what we call a hotspot meeting. It is internal and interdepartmental. It is a reaction to some of the challenging behaviors that we see on the street and in our community that the city receives complaints about. It is also in response to acknowledging some of the limitations of our police force, whether it is depleted ranks at the moment or whether some of these issues don't necessarily require a police response and would not necessarily lead to incarceration or aren't crimes that rise to that level. In this meeting, we have Ingrid Jonas joins us. We have the fire department, the police department, other impacted departments. Sarah Russell joins us, the Fletcher Free Library. It's a chance for us to share observations and feedback, whether we've received this from members of the community or whether our staff have noticed. And it's also an opportunity to brainstorm solutions to these community issues that might not involve the police department. You might ask, why would we need to be identifying hotspots? Sometimes hotspots, which we would note as clusters of activity that are impacting businesses or community members or our visitors. And sometimes they're not always on the police's radar. Sometimes they move location. Sometimes their impacts are different. Sometimes the individuals in these hotspot locations are different and have different needs as well. So part of the meeting is to identify these hotspots. And some of the solutions that have come out of these meetings are, for example, we now have sheriff representation in the Marketplace Garage. The sheriff does not necessarily intervene. In fact, we ask him to be there more in a supportive role. He's not there to arrest people. He's there to de-escalate behaviors that may impact our downtown. We also identified we have a winter market in City Hall Park for the holiday season. We identified that those sheds for the vendors are not used during the day. So we coordinated with Sarah Russell and some service providers in our community to provide services in those sheds during the day so that individuals who are in the park have access to communicate with someone who may be able to assist them. We have had some rotating solutions. For example, when the school season started, we identified a need to bag some meters near the high school to allow for a police cruiser to be parked there to ensure for the safety of our students that were coming and going from the high school. We identified some areas that may not have received, we identified some areas where we felt that services from our CSLs, who are social workers embedded in the police department. They may not have received calls regarding to these areas, but by identifying areas where there were maybe clusters of individuals who could use support, we were able to deploy some of our CSLs in advance before anyone called to try and see if there were any services that we could offer them. We've even found some simple solutions, such as officers doing their paperwork in their cruisers parked in the city versus doing their paperwork in the office. It just adds to a presence, a police presence, and a visibility for our police department. And during the holiday season, the group decided that it might make sense to add temporary private security at nights in both garages because we were having a high level of visitors coming into town for the holidays, and we felt that that would be helpful. We've also identified, for example, through this group and its initiative, that many of the individuals living homeless in our community need a space to store their belongings during the day. We are still looking for a proper location for that storage facility that would be easily accessible to these community members. We've also identified small fixes that have assisted the police department. For example, if there are businesses or buildings that have recessed entryways or alcoves, that recessed entryway is considered private property and is not under the purview of the police department unless they were to observe an emergent or violent situation. However, by coordinating with some of the private property owners and asking them to put up a no trespass sign in the windows of some of those recessed alcoves, it allows the police department to engage with that population a little bit more and control some of the behavior occurring in those areas. So again, that's just a brief update on these meetings, and we've been holding them for at least 6 months now, and it's turned into a creative solutions environment that we are trying to approach some of the challenges in our downtown from different directions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. And one of the examples, what I think that Hotspots works so well at, is showing how effective we can be when we use all the eyes and ears of the city and also think about solutions across departments. So I really appreciate how this initiative has really started to bring multiple parts of cities' leadership together to find solutions and ever innovating and doing an iterative process, because things are ever changing in the city. Was there another thing? I saw a little signal, wasn't sure what that signal was. I'm just doing great. I think I'm gonna take that as you're doing great. Keep going. All right, we have one more item under our general community safety updates, and City Attorney Jessica Brown and I are gonna tag team this. I'll give a little overview, only if there's questions, don't worry. Yeah, I try not to lie to my department heads and put them up at the podium but just to Chief LaChance, but he forgives me, it's fine. But this is a very, very important one, and it's one that I want to make sure that folks in the community in particular continue to understand how we're responding to the Trump administration. I do consider this, many aspects of this related directly to community safety. So I want to reiterate what I have said already in terms of public statements so far since the Trump administration began in January, that this city, the city of Burlington, stands with all members of our community and remains committed to making this a safe and inclusive community. We are not changing our existing policies, and I proudly stand by our 2016 commitment to immigrants and refugees who are members of our community. We also stand alongside trans and non-gender conforming and all LGBTQ+ residents as well. In terms of a few updates of what we have been doing or continuing to do, most importantly, our FIP policy, our fair and impartial police policy for the Burlington Police Department, still stands. We will not proactively initiate civil immigration enforcement within the city. This city policy has existed since 2020. And the Burlington Police Department has not assisted ICE or any other federal immigration agency with any civil matters since the Trump administration began. We are committed to continue to put out accurate information, because that is critical as a city and as a leader to minimize the fear that is very much out there amongst many parts of our community, not only in the city of Burlington, but state of Vermont. And we do not want to add to misinformation that contributes to fear or uncertainty for folks in our community. We are currently updating city building and employment policies. The library has already taken charge and placed a policy in place around how public space will be how public space will be used in terms of if there was any immigration action in a city building on site. That's not only for the sake and safety of employees, but also folks who are using our public spaces. We've held 2 community convenings so far with organizations and advocacy organizations to help facilitate the exchange of information, resources, and identify continued needs here in our community. We just held one of those yesterday in this room, and the room was full of folks from all sorts of organizations throughout Burlington, but the general region and state. We have already started to feel funding impacts related to the Trump administration's actions. I want to be clear that this is happening. I was on a call with other mayors throughout the country about a week or so ago, and some still haven't felt this yet, but Burlington has. And there are 2 federal grants that are frozen, and I want to emphasize they're frozen. The money has not disappeared yet. Related to our work within Burlington Electric Department and also our Business, Workforce, and Development Department. The grants for BED related to climate, specifically EV, electric vehicle funding, and for the BWD grant, this was related to a workforce development initiative to bring folks into the construction trades in a very intentional partnership with Resource and Vermont Works for Women in the city. These are frozen, and I want to be clear that there's many lawsuits swirling around there, and we don't have resolution yet on what happens with this particular funding, but it has impacted us immediately. We are also working hard to protect voter information related to all resident voting here in the city of Burlington. We're working actively with the Georgetown Law School and a center they have down there who've offered advice through the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and we're going to make sure that we continue to protect people's data and privacy to make sure that folks feel able to still participate in our local democratic process. As I mentioned earlier, we're continuing to work with, continuing to advance our overdose prevention center work. However, we are monitoring our sibling cities in Providence, Rhode Island in particular, as well as New York City, to see the impacts of any federal policy changes related to their operating and currently operating OPCs. Providence has been a very generous partner already, and if Teresa was here, she and I would share a little bit more. We took a tour last week when I was in the city for our U.S. Conference of Mayors conference. They are very eager to continue to support us in implementing this policy, and I will also say it was a convening of New England mayors. About half a dozen or so mayors took that tour with us. It's not just Burlington. Sizable cities throughout our region are really trying to find a way to bring this life-saving tool online. And then finally, we are reviewing and joining amicus briefs that come our way to be helpful to Burlington, as well as helpful to the general sentiment among municipalities across the country to stand against harmful changes that are happening on the federal level. And just this week, I signed on to a letter with the U.S. Conference of Mayors to oppose a federal bill proposed to defund sanctuary cities. We are actively monitoring this every day and taking actions necessary to make sure that Burlington is not stepping away from making sure our values are clear, that we want safe and inclusive communities, that we are proceeding with our priorities set by this community and this mayor, and that we are doing what we can to respond in these uncertain times. And that is the official close of all the updates. Thank you for hanging in there. There's a lot going on, and as I said in the beginning, we want to make sure that we're getting all this information out to members of the public. And so with that, open for questions. Hi.
Question about the Overdose Prevention Center. Are there any locations being considered? And if so, can you talk about where those are?
So we've not settled on any, we're not at that point of community engagement process. There was some initial work done by our planning commission to start looking at zoning changes that would need to be done, but they paused in order for us to catch up with making sure we're getting the state grant money flowing to the city of Burlington, hiring Teresa, which we did in December, and then starting to make sure we're engaging with our service provider selection of that person, or entities, I should say plural. That's important that we do this selection of site and community engagement together with those partners. That is, I think, the best process going forward. And I will say, because I see Nancy in the back, we always are going to use data, though, to inform where the best location would be, to make sure that the community understands that we need to make sure people will use this based on the information we know now around where drug use is happening, where maybe needle and syringe is being at higher rates. It makes no sense at all if we place something on the far edges of town with no public transportation, some very common sense pieces that line up with a best selection of a site.
You spoke about how Chief Burke is the interim right now, likely in through 2025. Is he just one of many candidates you're going to be looking at throughout this process, and how is that going to go forward?
So interim police Chief Burke is our interim chief, and he begins on March 24th, and we're very excited to welcome him here. He will be the interim chief until we hire and select the final and permanent chief for the Burlington Police Department. That process is continuing, as Ingrid mentioned. We're going to obviously seek his counsel, Chief Burke's counsel, around the timeline and how we're using the firm most effectively. My goal remains ideally hiring the permanent candidate by the end of 2025. Chief Burke is here on a 2-year contract and will move into a leadership support role at that point if we stick our landing with the timeline. There is plenty of work to do here in the city of Burlington related to community safety. So I would plan to make sure he supports new leadership. We have 2 deputy chief positions, one that we're hiring right now. The other will be anticipated vacancy later in this year. That's a lot of new leadership for our police department. And so this is why I can't emphasize how incredibly valuable and appreciative I am, how valuable he is and how appreciative I am of Chief Burke coming to the city of Burlington, because it really is the exactly right person we need at this time for the next 2 years.
But he hasn't expressed any interest in formally taking on the position beyond interim?
No, not at this point, but again, we haven't even started the hiring process in terms of the chief. He's very committed though to this city, and I can tell you it is one of the things that really stood out in all of our conversations is how much he cares about the success of this agency, the health of this agency, the folks who work here, the pride for which many people who are alums of this agency still hold, who are in and around Vermont still.
Why 2 years?
Why 2 years?
2-year contract.
Well, that was in our negotiations with what he was looking for in terms of making it worth his while in many ways to come across the way. He obviously is the chief currently in South Burlington, and we wanted to make sure that this was something that supported his employment goals.
How much will the pay be?
We're going to bring that to the Board of Finance on Tuesday because Monday's a holiday, and so that will be posted today. Today is Thursday, right? I don't have it memorized in my head, but there's a memo being posted. We did go through why we're going to Board of Finance is we're reclassifying that position in order to catch up with where chief pay rate has gone in the region. And we've used various resources we'll talk about at Board of Finance to justify a higher pay band. So it's around $175,000 or so. No? It will be posted. Please don't quote me on that. I just don't have it memorized. But it is higher, and we're bringing it to Board of Finance to explain that reclassification need.
Does that mean if you hire a different chief that both chiefs, I guess, interim, Burke, and then a new one will be paid kind of the same amount?
Well, we'll see based on the qualifications. We have personnel policy that governs how people get placed on a salary step. Even I was placed on a salary step based on someone's experience. And so we'll see. It'll depend on the candidate.
And from what you just said is that Burke will be moving into kind of a support position and Chief Burke will be moving into a support position. Are you indicating that he likely will not be the permanent chief and you're really going to be doing this robust search for somebody else?
We'll see. But there's one thing I've learned about being mayor, it's being flexible and not predicting how things will go. So we'll see how it transpires. What he and I have talked about so far is a 2-year agreement, and that is the terms for which we're planning to do this. Interim chief first, supporting the hiring of a new chief, permanent chief, and then moving into an advisory role depending on how that timeline goes.
Do you know how much has been budgeted for the search firm?
Do you remember, Ingrid, what the amount is?
The proposals are wide ranging, but the amount, I don't know what is budgeted. I know what they've proposed, but I don't actually know exactly what the line item would be.
Right, I can get back to you with that through Joe, but we do have money set aside knowing that we would need to make sure that we hired help to be able to do a robust search process that included finding national candidates, the right kind of recruitment that we need to bring the right kind of candidate here to Burlington.
Do you have to do a search process in the hiring of a position like this? Do you have to do this national process? Or if Chief Burke were to throw his hat in the ring, could you just outright hire?
Well, we could change the process, certainly. There is no requirement that we do a national search. This is what Burlington has done in the last several rounds. All those conversations I've had with almost half a dozen law enforcement leaders, as I mentioned, talked about it would be highly valuable to find a permanent a person here locally who knows Burlington. The conversations I've had with Chief Burke so far indicate that he's interested in a 2-year support role, if you will, both interim and then supporting new leadership. And if things evolve from there, we will evolve our process.
There's certain policies that you've issued on the current police department, including the executive order to review all of their press releases, which I believe has been happening. Can you kind of talk about what that process has looked like? Who's approving these press releases? And once a press release is sent to your office, what does that process look like from there?
There is only one executive order that I have issued, period, in the entire time I've been mayor. And I do not have policy oversight of the Burlington Police Department per charter. So at this point, that executive order was time limited until we update the police department's press release policy, which has not been updated for a number of years. We're in the process of doing so now. In general, and my staff reviews this along with Ingrid, Joe McGee, my deputy chief of staff, and my chief of staff, Aaron Jacobson. But they have a whole system where there's always someone on call so that we efficiently review and give feedback. We do not edit line any of these press releases. We provide feedback on suggestions that we think need to be considered, and then things are put out very efficiently. I can't give you a scientific count, but it's always within the day, usually within an hour or so of a press release coming in.
So it's different people in your administration reviewing them?
To make sure we're always available and that we are never a bottleneck to important information going out. Plus, in the executive order, as you might recall, there is information in there that specifically talks about in the case of emergency, there is an opening to make sure vital information for the sake of public safety goes out as quickly as possible, and that this process not ever hamstring that. Hamstring that.
And I know you're saying that this policy could probably evolve over the next, as you evolve this policy going forward. Do you think that you're going to have this kind of oversight on press releases once Chief Burke takes over as chief?
So the executive order, as it's written and will remain, is that it will be in existence until the press release policy is updated, regardless of who's the leader of BPD. It also, in any policy review per BPD operating procedures, it needs to go through the police commission as well. That commission meets once a month. So there's a little bit of a timeline that we have to honor for the sake of the police commission's schedule.
Can you just talk a little more about what your expectations are for Chief Burke, just in the interim? What priorities did you convey to him in your conversations with him? And did you talk to him about how you wanted the department to be operated differently at all? I mean, what sort of did you convey to him?
The biggest thing I said to him is that it is very clear to me that we need an internal focus from our next permanent chief, but also the interim chief. That there's a lot of information and rebuilding that needs to happen from an analysis of how feedback rank and file have been giving, culture issues, retention issues, recruitment issues. There's a lot of issues that relate to just the internal operations of our police department. And that's again why I think I couldn't find a better person, frankly, who has such a long history with the Burlington Police Department, as well as obviously leadership now experience from the South Burlington Police Department to look at some of our internal struggles. And so again, to put a finer point on it, and I've said this several times, is our recruitment strategy needs a good, healthy, and honest review. We need to be able to look at what we've been doing so far. Is it the most effective? What are we missing? At this U.S. Conference of Mayors convening last week, they talked about police recruitment and the struggles that every city in New England, and I would imagine nationally, are facing. The city of Boston has some really exciting and interesting strategies that were very purposeful around community partnerships, having everyone within the department be engaged in recruitment, intentional trust-building relationships that make sure that when a vacancy is open, that people can see themselves entering the police department in those roles, and they would by extension be extra recruiters, but only when you have developed those trusted relationships. These are not transactional moments. We have to take the time to build those relationships. So I really want to healthily review our recruitment strategies, both to make sure they're effective, and we're upping our number of applicants of highly qualified people to come join our police department, but that the faces of those folks reflect the faces of the city of Burlington. That's another critical piece. Again, Boston has done a great work on this, and I would really look to them as a model. I also want to make sure that we're looking at retention strategies and leadership cultivation. This U.S. Conference of Mayors conference went at great lengths to expose us to some really pretty innovative training programs out there. There's one at the University of Chicago's Crime Lab that in particular looks interesting to me, not only because it's free, but it's specifically designed for folks who are coming up the ranks, who potentially could be developed in their leadership skills to become command staff. That is something I've seen as a weakness within our police department that we can do better by, and to make sure folks feel supported and encouraged to move up the ranks so that when we have openings, we have a bench to consider for deputy chief. We have a bench to consider for chief. We're not at that point, and I want to make sure this city is at that point in the next couple of years.
The city currently has a use of force lawsuit against it, and a Burlington police officer, from a man who's accusing a Burlington police officer of pushing him to the ground and hurting his wrist as a result. Where does this process currently stand, and how is the city reacting to this lawsuit?
Yep. So there is a use of force lawsuit that just came in, and the Burlington Police Department has adopted and abides by a statewide use of force policy, which includes the requirement to review all police instances that use force at all, so any use of force whatsoever. The city followed that policy and the review requirements in this particular case and incident, and it was determined that Officer Campbell's actions were within that policy. The city intends to review the plaintiff's allegation and respond accordingly, as we do with any lawsuit, through our normal course of court proceedings. Also, what exists within the city of Burlington is a mayoral executive order issued by Mayor Weinberger back in 2020. Executive orders stand until a mayor decides to rescind them, so this is still an active executive order. I want to be clear that I did follow that executive order when it came to me, but the mayor doesn't have any additional authority whatsoever to intervene in a use of force case. But I did my due diligence when it came to me in late November to review the incident. Ingrid Jonas helped me do this. I had not done one before, to go through and do my due diligence of reviewing body cam footage, as well as any documentation around this case. And it was, to me, I determined a proper use of force. Now, I say that, and I also want to make sure that folks know that any time that there's a use of force that rises to the level of engagement of the mayor or even the police commission is an opportunity for us to reflect. And so I want to make sure that we're always looking at our policies and procedures, our trainings, our de-escalation strategies, our ability to support officers in making those very hard decisions in the field to the best of their ability, and making sure they have what they need to use other tools when necessary, so use of force becomes less and less of a strategy that's even needed at all.
Can you speak to what triggered this review going from the police commission to your office? Because as far as I understand, not every use of force case goes to your office.
Yep. So the executive order, for which I printed, because I don't have these memorized, when Mayor Weinberger issued this executive order in 2020, the language in this executive order, which we can provide copies of if people are interested, is invoked when in any situation where a police officer uses force that results in injury to any person or raises a significant public concern. And I quote that because it is a bit vague in terms of the definition of what kind of injury or public concern. And so we have flagged this as something that needs further definition to make sure there's clarity on both sides. The police chief reviewed this right after the incident happened in mid-August. The police commission also reviewed this in maybe late September, early November. This executive order actually should have required me being consulted before it went to the police commission, because that is what it is designed to do, to provide both the chief of police's recommendation and the mayor's input to then go to the police commission. So the order of things didn't work quite as they should, which is again why I think this executive order needs further refinement in order for it to be a useful document for every party involved.
So sorry, did the police commission ask you to consult on it afterward, just like since the order was out of order?
So the chief notified my chief of staff around mid-November after the police commission issued their agreement with initially the BPD's findings. So as I mentioned, it was out of order. I was unaware at that point that there was even an issue that would have triggered the executive order. Again, there are multiple examples of use of force. There's a whole spectrum of what that gets defined by Burlington Police Department policy. This is really in, I think, the high level needing the attention of the mayor when there's a matter of public concern, or I would say significant injury, which is again why this particular executive order needs some tightening.
You've mentioned talks of, figuring out proposals for a public safety building in Burlington. Obviously, we have the big building on Cherry Street that's now vacant, and Memorial Auditorium. The state's proposing that these vacant buildings be used for housing. Have you thought about whether they could be used for housing or if they could fit your proposal for a public safety building?
So we definitely need a new public safety building within the center core of the city. It's a little bit of a game of Tetris to figure out where our available sites, and also how can they be best utilized by both police and fire, who have different needs physically for the site. For example, and the police can probably quote how long a ladder truck is, there's turn radius and all sorts of technical information. I won't even possibly bother you with my ability to clunk through that. But there's a lot of considerations, both on what streets vehicles are exiting from, a central locality for people to be able to access the victim services, for example, that are provided within should be provided within a public safety building. So a lot of considering factors. There are some buildings that are more available and ready to go, other spaces a little bit more ready and available to go, but all of them are a little bit complicated at this point. To the Memorial Block, we are actively working with two developers. There's a pre-development agreement with Joe Larkin and Eric Farrell. We are bringing to the council in mid-March an update on what's happening on that block. To the housing point, that is the second priority I have for my administration, is to make sure we advance ample affordable housing in particular, but more housing in general within the city. So there is a number of housing units that will be put in terms of the design. We're at the design concept after a lot of public feedback on that block, as well as other public amenities that we need in that space. That's probably not going to be a block where we will place a public safety building, considering how much other things need to go on in that block. So we're looking at other sites, and that is part of why we have the consultant that we were about to select.
You also touched on Burlington being a sanctuary city and the current Trump administration's policies. I'm aware that ICE has come into Burlington and spoken with residents. How is Burlington prepared to protect its residents when things like this happen? And if ICE comes in, what's going to happen after that?
Well, I turn back to our FIP policy, the fair and impartial policing policy. We have not, that still stands in terms of the Burlington Police Department will not proactively engage in civil immigration matters. Criminal matters are different, but any civil immigration matters, that is not the charge nor the duty of the Burlington Police Department or city. I mentioned before that we're looking at public buildings and making sure buildings are that both staff and those who are in buildings feel safe and protected and understand what is required for engagement with federal immigration officials. So you all probably have seen at this point, like, what is a warrant, is a proper warrant or not. We're engaging with those partners I mentioned before in these meetings to understand what are they offering in terms of know your rights convenings for folks in the community. The biggest part is that we want to make sure that we minimize fear if we possibly can, to make sure people have accurate information and know they have safe places in not only city buildings, but our partners in the school district and by extension youth organizations, vulnerable populations in particular. I want to make sure folks in Burlington don't let fear get in the way of them engaging in voting, being able to go to work, being able to go to school, and that is some of the most immediate stuff that we're trying to do to be good, strong partners with our community stakeholders who are also doing this important immigration work.
On the chief search process, did you ask Chief Burke to take the job, and do you continue to hope that he will?
I look forward to starting to work with Chief Burke. I have not worked with him before, besides, again, several conversations over the course of being mayor, period, even from the beginning. And so we'll see how these conversations emerge. I was initially asking for interim chief because that's what I was seeking first. But as I said, open door. I've learned that as mayor. Open doors and possibilities about what emerges from there. He is just a very, very highly qualified leader, and I just feel incredibly fortunate that he is coming to the city.
And so that 2-year contract is $170, I believe it's around $172,000, regardless of, what his position is, whether it's a support or, full chief.
Yes.
Was the timeline for finishing by the end of the year, is that set out by the city, or is that potentially the search firms that you're looking at? Is that what they recommended, taking that amount of time?
That's my hope, simply because I want to make sure we're moving forward with building the department's leadership bench and making sure we have a permanent leader identified. And of course, in the hiring process, lots of things happen that we can't predict, but my hope, to set the goal from the administration, is to bring on a chief by the end of this calendar year. Then Chief Burke would move into a support role. Again, I want to remind folks, we will have 2 new deputy chiefs at that point and a new chief. There's a lot of new there'll just be a lot of new on this in the department, and it's unknown if any of those folks will be internal candidates. And so I want to make sure that the department has all that they need to feel, the rank and file in particular, feel supported over the next 2 years.
So Chief Burke would be on regardless for the 2 years?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
He'll transition to another role. As I said, there's endless amounts of things to do in the city in terms of community safety.
This is my last question. The last time there was a process, it was very elongated, there was lots of fits and starts, it was, but there were not very many responses to this. What have you done to be able to, I guess, sweeten the deal to make sure that people are responding to this and want to come to the city to be the chief?
Well, we haven't started the hiring process yet, and so that's part of what we are engaging these firms to make sure we pick the right one. I'm not interested in a cookie cutter proposal. I really need it to be tailored to Burlington and what Burlington needs right now, the kind of city we are, the fact that the size of our agency, the kind of challenges we have around rebuilding, the kind of values that we hold in this city. When I talk to those nearly dozen law enforcement leaders, I specifically ask, some of them are former chiefs of BPD, how was your hiring process? What would you recommend we do or never do again? Community engagement is a really high expectation in this city, so there will be some level of community engagement. But I also think we need to make sure that's balanced to make sure we're getting the right kind of input into that process, because ultimately it will be my decision about who to appoint to this role, and then council confirmation, of course, after that. And I'm making sure, I want to really make sure that we find someone who is well suited to coming into the size of the city of Burlington. And I think there's some lessons we can perhaps learn around big cities, small cities, and what lines up or doesn't. But then again, it's also about the values of the candidate, the experience of the candidate, and the input that a hiring committee will have and the advice they'll provide to me around which candidate will best fit for Burlington.
2 more brief questions on Sanctuary City. So in
I think it's
2017,
water while you ask me this question.
in 2017, the federal government threatened to withhold certain funds, including the JAG burn grant for the police department related to Sanctuary City status. Now they've kind of upped the ante and have suggested that federal transportation dollars could be on the table. Has the city received any communication from the feds along those lines, as it did, however many years ago now, that you're aware of?
Not to my knowledge.
So not, other than the executive orders that everybody is seeing, we haven't to date received any specific letters or notifications targeting, other than, the mayor referenced some grants that are frozen, but those are not necessarily, while they are impacting us, they're not specific to Burlington. So we haven't received any communications directly identifying or indicating action on any of our federal funding based on our whatever status the federal government thinks we hold as a city right now.
And the second one is just, there have been a number of cities and states that have filed lawsuits challenging Trump's actions on sanctuary cities. As the city, you mentioned amicus briefs, but will the city consider joining those lawsuits?
So we're looking at them on a case-by-case basis, and also looking to our state attorney general's office to see what they're doing. They've taken the lead so far in a lot of that, which frankly I think most municipalities in the state are grateful for. And so it will depend, is it being handled on the state level? Do we need to sign on? Is it specific to something that impacts Burlington, in which case we might want to? So we've seen a few so far. At this point, I know of one that we're signing on to that has to do with the funding impacts to BED.
So becoming a party of a lawsuit, or just a letter of support?
Signing on to an amicus brief specifically.
Okay. It's been about an hour, so I think we're going to cut it. Okay. Please come back next month and learn more. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you. One update, folks. The contract for Chief Burke will be on the March 10th Board of Finance, not the 18th.
That's what that
Finalizing
signal was.
the details.
That's what that signal was. March 10th. Thank you.